Previously on Beyond the Lens.
If we were going to reboot the show, I think the technology stuff is going to be the biggest thing that's going to need to be adjusted. And they would have to go in more of the folklore mystery route with it, as opposed to things that they did previously.
Are you nostalgic, a parent, or perhaps a child at heart? When it comes to children's media, from books to TV shows, and even movies, there's often more than meets the eye. Is it well written? Does it still hold up today? What works and what doesn't? Or maybe you wonder what went on behind the scenes of that work. Together, a trio of adults who are also kids at heart will critique and comment on one piece of children's media each episode.
Hello, this is Eric.
Hi, I'm PJ.
And I'm Rico. You're listening to Beyond the Lens, a family-friendly podcast. Hello everyone, I'm Rico. Welcome to a brand new episode of Beyond the Lens. I'm joined once again by PJ.
Hey everybody.
Okay, and over the course of these next few episodes of the podcast, we'll be doing sort of some update episodes for topics we covered last season, because there's been a few episodes where we discussed, or at least discussed in part, content that was expected to come out but wasn't out yet at the time of the episode. And so these episodes will sort of give these updates now that that content's now out. Today's episode is no exception. Our penultimate episode last season was about the 90s PBS show Ghostwriter, and we discussed the potential for an upcoming reboot of the show. And less than 5 months later, the first few episodes of the reboot appeared on a then new streaming service, Apple TV Plus. And the reboot is very different from the original show, so I figured it'd be worth spending another episode talking about. So, PJ, how familiar are you with Ghostwriter, either the original 1992 version or the Apple TV Plus reboot?
Now, I think I was absent for the episode in the first season. I think it was just you and Eric that covered the show. I can't remember why I wasn't in that episode.
I think it was just due to scheduling conflicts, if I recall.
Yeah, something like that. But I wasn't in that episode. So I am completely unfamiliar with Ghostwriter. I didn't even know it was a show until you and Eric recorded that episode, actually. So I have never seen a single episode or heard of it, both the original and the reboot.
So I guess before we start talking about the reboot, we should talk a little bit about the original so that we can better compare and contrast them. So in the early 1990s, Sesame Workshop, which was then called the Children's Television Workshop, wanted to create a show that promoted literacy for a slightly older demographic. The idea was that Sesame Street would teach young children how, like, basic letters, numbers, basic phonics, things like that. Then once they got older, they would sort of graduate to another show they produced, The Electric Company, which taught them like more complex phonics and how to read and things like that. And then they wanted to create a new show that kids who got sort of too old for the Electric Company to graduate to continue learning about reading and writing. And this was the 90s, and they wanted to have it appeal to the more so the MTV generation. So they actually brought on an MTV producer, Liz Nealon, to help create the show. And the educational requirement that was needed for the show is that text needed to be on screen. And so the question was sort of, where does this text come from? And that is what led to the creation of the series concept. So the 1992 version of Ghostwriter was about a group of kids in New York City called the Ghostwriter Team, who solve mysteries around the neighborhood with the help of a friendly ghost that they named Ghostwriter. Ghostwriter can't hear or talk, but he can read and write, and he is only able to see and manipulate written letters, and those words are only visible to the Ghostwriter team. It was an award-winning show back in the day, but it ran out of money and was canceled due to lack of funding. in its third season. And there actually was an earlier reboot attempt of sorts on CBS in 1997. It was based largely around the same concept, but with different characters. But it didn't do all that well ratings-wise and was canceled after one season. So some of the challenges going into the idea of rebooting Ghostwriter in today's day and age is that the technology that was used in the 90s has come a long way since then. There was, like, for example, one point in the original show where the idea of CDs having computer programs on was used as a joke because they only had music back then. Dial-up modems were used to connect directly to other computers, and then one episode featured a video piracy ring that was selling bootleg VHS tapes. And it was just a few of the things that were sort of out of date. Another thing that was sort of out of date was that sort of the ways that the team operated came out of date. Like, for example, there was one part in the show where they would write rally, and Ghostwriter would send that message to others when they wanted to meet to discuss the case. But now rally messages can easily just be sent through text messages and not through Ghostwriter. And then there's also the internet, which makes finding certain things a little bit easier without the need for Ghostwriter. But one thing that sort of was going for the original was that it had a serialized storyline, and that each story was told in 4 to 5 half-hour episodes. So that would make more sense on like a streaming network for like binge watching. But there have been several things that would have to change for this reboot to work. And so that's when we get to Apple TV Plus, which is Apple's relatively new streaming platform for various TV shows and movies. Sesame Workshop partnered with Apple early on to produce shows for kids on the platform, one of which was The Helpsters, which is more for a younger demographic than Ghostwriter. But they were also interested in pursuing a Ghostwriter reboot for the platform. And as far as I know, like, they tasked several different people and production companies to come up with different ways of reimagining the concept for a new modern audience. And the production company that won out, the one that was chosen, was Sinking Ship Entertainment, which is known for actually a lot of different shows that you might have heard of, Odd Squad, Endlings, and Dana, to name a few. PG, have you heard of any of those shows?
Unfortunately, I have not.
So I actually had previously heard about the reboot before its like announcement that it was coming back, because someone essentially edited the Wikipedia article on Ghostwriter mentioning there was a casting call for the reboot. And so this was about a year before the Beyond the Lens podcast episode was recorded, but I did look at the casting call, and there's like a little bit of the script present in the casting call, as well as a short description of how the show is reimagined. But the concept that was on the page for that casting call was actually slightly different from the final show. So PJ, I know you're an actor. Do you know why that could be? Why there might be some changes between the casting call and what was ultimately filmed and released?
That's a really good question, actually. I mean, it really depends on several circumstances. I mean, I'm not sure about that specific situation, but I remember one of the movies I was in, I auditioned for the main role. And she was the lead character, and they called me back for a different character. And I'm like, oh, well, that's weird because I auditioned for this character. And then I went and auditioned for the new character. And then apparently I was the only one that was auditioning for that second character. So I thought, oh, well, I'm going to get this character then because, they think that I'm a better fit for this character. But then I got the final, I guess, role that I landed, and it was for a completely different character. I'm like, okay, well, what just happened? And they explained, oh, well, we thought you would fit like a different character like instead. So now I was playing this third character. But then right before I was about to film, they're like, oh, well, actually, the actress that was supposed to play the second character, well, she got sick. Do you want to switch roles with her? And I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah, that's fine. So I mean, things change for so many reasons. I know for auditions, people might think that you would fit a different role better. And most of the time, casting directors know what they're doing. They truly look for an actor that can play a certain part. You know, for BoJack Horseman, I auditioned for that show as well because they were looking for an asexual actress to play the asexual rabbit on the show, and ended up going to Echo Gillette, who is also asexual, but I'll also agree that she was indeed a better fit for that character because she was more like spunky and upbeat. That's not really my own personality. So I think the casting director made a great call there. And of course, I auditioned for another show called Everything's Gonna Be Okay, where there's an autistic woman on the show who is played by an autistic actress. I also auditioned for that role. So it really depends on several circumstances on what people are looking for. Sometimes if shows don't work out, it could be like the casting went wrong or things went a different direction. So, I mean, there could be different reasons why that sort of thing didn't work out.
Well, that was really interesting to hear. So anyway, so the final concept that ended up being released on the streaming services will also include a little bit of a recap of some of what happens in the first few episodes. There's before the show even begins, there's a middle school student, Ruben, whose grandmother has recently died, and he and his single mother moves in to his grandfather's place to help take care of him, as well as the family-owned bookstore. And so Ruben is essentially the new kid in school, and he doesn't take too well in that. He's having a hard time fitting in. One of the first scenes is that he's eating lunch alone at his locker when he accidentally, or maybe it'd be better to say mysteriously, spills his soup, and it causes a basketball player to slip and fall, and he injures his shoulder, and that the basketball player's name is Curtis. And then later, Ruben is at the bookstore talking to a family friend around his age named Siobhan, and that's when Curtis and his little sister Donna stops in the bookstore to look around. Donna's juice is accidentally spilled, and then suddenly the word hello appears in the juice on the floor. And so the next day, the four kids see the words come together mysteriously appear on a chalkboard at a cafeteria bake sale. And it's discovered that only these four kids are the ones who can see the message. And so Donna immediately jumps to the conclusion that it's a ghost that's responsible for all of this. And then as the series goes on, the ghost essentially starts releasing characters from books that, again, only these four kids can see. And it starts with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. And when this happens, the book that these characters are from turns blank, so it's no longer able to be read. And so even though the characters are visible to the kids only, but the interactions with like real world items are real. Like, for example, there's one part where there's a recreation of the Tea Party scene from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and it's recreated from all these bake sale items. And during the scene, the Mad Hatter essentially trashes the place, makes a huge mess of things, but the kids end up getting caught by the principal, who only sees the mess created by the characters and the kids. They don't see any of the characters that were released. So throughout the series, the kids try to discover the ghost's unfinished business, as it was, and why particular characters are being released from the books, as well as how to like put them back in the books. So believe it or not, in many ways, our MIA friend Eric had some of his predictions right when it came to this reboot. It went into more of like a folklore or mystery route as opposed to a detective mystery route that was used in the original series. They also updated the use of technology. And at one point, he predicted that there might be some use of like ghost hunting technology. And while that wasn't there, there was a character, psychic medium, who was more in tune with the spiritual world, who sort of hints and knows that there is a ghost present among them in the bookstore. And it's on a streaming platform that better benefits binge watching, Apple TV Plus, as well as more up to date CGI for the ghosts and the ghost interactions. Like in the original 1992 version, it's essentially just hand drawn animation of the ghost that is combined with the actual live action footage. Whereas here, the ghost is CG, and although you don't see the ghost all that often, you see his interaction that looks a lot more like modern compared to what was seen in the original. And as far as the educational goals for the series, the goals have shifted from more of a focus on literacy to a focus on literature. The kids who watch the show would be encouraged to read books that they might not otherwise be interested in reading. And I think that had I been a kid watching this iteration in Ghostwriter, I'd probably be more interested in reading the books featured on the show as well. So the books that have been featured on the show, a few of them have been public domain stories like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, The Jungle Book, Frankenstein, and Sherlock Holmes. There was one episode where they optioned the rights to a mystery book, The Disappearance of Emily H. But most of the stories that are being told are like wholly original. Like there's one sci-fi Western hybrid book called Trinity. There's also a pirate time travel adventure called Time Castaways. And then there's another book that's essentially central to the mystery of the ghost's unfinished business called The Cobalt Mask. I don't want to give too much away there. I wanted this to be sort of spoiler free for those who might want to check out the series. But PJ, based on what you've heard, what do you think of the concept overall, as well as like what sort of books did you like to read growing up?
Well, it was very difficult for me to read because, for those that don't know, I have hyperlexia. So it's essentially it's the opposite of dyslexia. And so I would read words very well, usually pronounce them right on the first try. And I was like a very avid speller, but my comprehension is very poor. Dare I say it's like a seventh graders. So books were a little challenging for me growing up. I would always read, if I ever read, it was usually nonfiction because I loved learning about animals. I wanted to be a zookeeper, and I just enjoyed learning facts in general. That's also why I watch game shows. So I don't really think I had a favorite book. If I had to choose a fiction book, like a chapter book or just fiction in general, I think there was, I liked comic books too. I really enjoyed Diary of a Wimpy Kid, that series, because it also kept me engaged with all the pictures and the style of writing. So I think I'm going to have to go with that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because again, when I was in high school when I figured this out, but I realized that I more so like reading non-fictional books as opposed to fictional books as well.
What about you? Do you have a favorite book?
Well, I'm not sure if I have a favorite book. I wasn't actually that much of a reader growing up. Like, what I did read was more so like, if it was fiction, it was more so realistic fiction, like Beverly Cleary's Ramona books,
Mm-hmm.
or if there was some sort of fantastical element. I appreciate it when it was more so grounded in reality, sort of like the body switching story Freaky Friday. So
That's a good one.
I guess if I had to pick a favorite book, I'd probably have to go with The Giver by Louis Leroy.
Yeah, that's a good one too. And I think one of my elementary school teachers read us that book. I tried to read it on my own, but it was just too far above my level. But I remember it being really good.
Yeah, sort of the same thing for me. Like I didn't read the book per se. It was read to me by my seventh grade teacher. Like read to the whole class. I think what he was trying to do was sort of open our eyes to like different kinds of books out there, sort of like the shelves. And I remember really liking the book. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there are several different new characters present in the series. There's Ruben, who we sort of talked about already. He's a new kid and has trouble making friends at first, as well as adjusting to his new living situation. Then there's Curtis, who's in more of an athletic type of student, and he's also slightly popular. But the first season also has a storyline that involves him being diagnosed with dyslexia. And then there's Curtis's younger sister Donna, who has a more fashion-forward thinking and sense of style. She loves sewing and creating new outfits and of her own designs, usually out of things she buys from thrift stores. And Siobhan is more of a book smart student who's very much focused on academics, and even her extracurriculars are more academically inclined, like debate and Model UN. And there's all sorts of different recurring characters. Some of the ones that I remember the most is the history teacher, Mr. Saunders, and Ruben's mom and his grandfather, and then also Curtis's and Donna's parents, who are recently divorced. So with that said, out of the characters I listed, what characters would you say what character do you think you would relate to the most?
What was the character with dyslexia's name again?
Curtis.
Otis?
Curtis.
Oh, Curtis. Okay. I think him simply because like if you have dyslexia or hyperlexia or any of the other learning disabilities, you are neurodivergent. So I think it's really cool that they included a character like that on the show.
Yeah, so I thought that storyline was actually pretty well handled. Like it doesn't even manifest as if something's wrong right away. Like in the first episode, it's revealed that Curtis is sort of kicked off the basketball team because his grade has started slipping in history, and as you know, most schools have a policy where you have to keep your grades up in order to participate in athletics. And sort of as the show goes on, it becomes clear to Siobhan that even though Curtis is like really trying hard in school, like he's still struggling. And so when they're partnered up on a project together, that's when she relates to a teacher that she thinks that something's wrong with Curtis, and that causes him to be referred to the school psychologist who wants to do some testing to see if there's something going on besides just any stress or anything like that. And that's when he discovers he has dyslexia. And
well, I will say real quickly that I just think it's really cool that they included a story like that on the show, because I'm sure it helps so many people who are questioning the same thing and are going, oh, maybe like I'm not alone in this. Because when you notice something different about yourself and you're not so sure, there's no resources and you don't really know where to go. I think that part of the show alone helped so many people.
yeah, as far as the character, I would say I relate to the most. I'd probably say Ruben, because he seems sort of shy and has a hard time making friends, and I think that's true for me. And then as far as comparing the two versions of the show, the original 1992 version and this 2019 version, so the 1992 version was set specifically in New York City, in Brooklyn, whereas this new version is still set in the city, but it's not really specified which city. I believe it's filmed out of Toronto, though, so there's that.
Rico, do you have a favorite out of the two versions?
Uh, it's sort of hard to say because I mean, you sort of talked a little bit about this with iCarly, where it's sort of hard to compare the original and the reboot because if I went into this blindly didn't know what the show was called, I would more so say that it reminded me of like Wishbone meets House of Anubis than it did like the original Ghostwriter. So that's just me. And speaking of one of those two shows that I just mentioned will be talked about later this season. I don't want to say which one yet, but I'm sure you're hyped for that one, PJ.
Oh yeah. Stay tuned, y'all. That one's gonna be awesome.
I guess since we're running out of time, do you have like any last minute thoughts about Ghostwriter?
Well, even though I haven't seen it, I do want to say that, like a lot of the shows that we've talked about on here, it seems like the newer one is more modernized, where instead of, I think you mentioned in the earlier version, they were actually writing letters. And then in this one, it's more like text messages and modern day technology. I think that's really cool. And because it's so different, it kind of engages a different, newer audience, so they can go back and look at the original version and kind of see where the inspiration came from. So as always, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is I have heard rumors that there was a season 3 that was picked up for the show by Apple, and there's also someone on Twitter who claimed to work on the show, and they said that there are actually episodes that were filmed that are yet to be seen, but I haven't heard any official confirmation of anything yet from Apple or Sesame Workshop or Seeking Chip or anything. But if any of those companies are listening for whatever reason, I hope you'd be able to update on us soon. I know COVID has affected a lot of the things, but the way season 2 ended, I wouldn't be surprised if the series ends where it is now. I hope that's not the case, but I'd like to hear something soon. So thank you everyone for listening. It's been exciting to dive back into the world of Ghostwriter again. The next episode will be another update episode that you don't want to miss. And I won't say what it is quite yet, but it's something that is not like you've heard before on Beyond the Lens. That's all I'll say for now, but until then, this has been a journey beyond the lens. This is Rico and PJ signing out. Goodbye.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Lens. The intro music is Work. That's WERQ by Kevin MacLeod. It is available under a Creative Commons Attribution License and can be downloaded for free at incompetech.com. Beyond the Lens is a Recore Entertainment production.